In the middle of the night, in a small hospital in northern England, babies were dying, one after another. Tiny, helpless babies, just hours or days old, were suddenly getting worse and then stopping breathing. The nurses ran, the doctors ran, they tried everything, but some of those babies never woke up. For a long time, nobody could explain why. But slowly, one name kept coming up. One nurse. Always there, always on duty when it happened. Her name was Lucy Letby. And by the time the world found out who she was, 7 babies were dead and 7 more had barely survived. This is the story of a woman who went from being called the girl next door to being called by the British press the worst child killer in modern British history. But even now, years later, people are still fighting about one question. Did she really do it? Hello everyone and welcome back to The Guilty Guilt. I'm your host, the girl behind the mask, and I'm so glad you're with me here today. Before we dive into today's case, just a quick heads up. We'll be discussing some pretty sensitive and difficult topics, including violence and distress. If you feel like this might be too much for you right now, please feel free to skip this one. Your well-being comes first. I spend a lot of time digging through court documents, police reports, public records, and so many more just to bring you the most accurate version of these stories. And I always double-check my facts. That said, I am just a human, not a journalist. If you spot anything off, just drop me a comment and I'll fix it. Everything here is told with the utmost respect for the victims and their families. If you appreciate the work I do, don't forget to subscribe and join our community. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Lucy Letby was born on January the 4th, 1990, in a quiet little town called Hereford in Western England. She was the only child of John and Susan Letby. John sold furniture for a living. Susan worked as an accountant's clerk. They lived in a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street near the River Wye, the kind of street where everybody knows everybody, and nothing much ever happens. By all accounts, Lucy had a normal, happy childhood. There were no signs of trouble, no dark secrets, no history of violence or abuse. Her parents were described as loving and close. They took family holidays to Turkey 3 times a year, a seaside town in the south, and Lucy was the center of their world. She went to local schools, Islestone schools and Hereford Sixth Form College. She had a part-time job at a shop called V.H. Smith. A childhood friend later told the BBC that Lucy had always wanted to work with babies. From a young age, she dreamed of becoming a neonatal nurse, caring for the most fragile newborns. And she went after that dream. She was the first person in her family to go to university. She applied to the University of Chester and got in. She studied children's nursing for 3 years, doing her training placements at Liverpool Women's Hospital and the Countess of Chester Hospital. During her final year, she failed one assessed placement, but passed a second attempt after asking for a different person to check her work. When she graduated in 2011 with honors, her proud parents put a notice in the local newspaper. It read, "Letby Lucy in child nursing finished with honors. We are so proud of you after all your hard work. Love, Mom and Dad. Lucy lived alone in a small house close to the hospital. Her parents had helped her buy it so she could settle into her new life in Chester. She had 2 rescue cats. She enjoyed salsa dancing and going out with her work friends. A man named Jordan Sands, who knew her through his girlfriend, later described her as quite awkward and geeky, but seemed like a kind-hearted person. Nobody looking at them noticed in the Hereford Times, or at this quiet young woman with her cats and her nursing uniform, could have ever imagined what would come next. After graduating, Lucy got a job to the Countess of Chester Hospital. It was the same hospital where she had done one of her training placements. She started working in the neonatal unit, the ward for sick and premature babies. The Countess of Chester is not a large hospital. It is not a specialist center. It is what the National Health Service calls a Level 2 unit. In practice, that means it treats moderately ill babies, but the sickest ones, the very premature, the very small, should normally be sent to bigger hospitals like Liverpool Women's. But sometimes when bigger hospitals were full, those critically ill babies ended up in Chester anyway. And this mattered more than anyone knew at the time. Her colleagues described Lucy as hard-working, friendly, sociable. She went to staff nights out. She smiled in photos at fundraising events. She was quoted in the local newspaper saying she enjoyed watching babies get better and supporting their families. She was even part of a campaign to raise money for a new neonatal unit at the hospital. Detective Chief Inspector Nicola Evans, who later investigated her, said there was nothing about Lucy Letby that stood out. She called her ordinary. Others used the word beige. But there was something else going on in her personal life that only came out during the trial. The court heard that Letby had developed feelings for a married doctor at the hospital. She sent him many text messages. A note found at her home said, quote, "I trusted you with everything and loved you, and you were my best friend. Please help me." Letby denied having a romantic relationship with the doctor, but the prosecution suggested that her desire for his attention may have played a part in what happened on the ward. The doctor did not feel the same way. In 2015, after additional specialist training, Lucy became one of a small number of nurses on the ward who were qualified to care for the sickest babies in intensive care. It was a responsibility she had worked hard to earn. And then, almost immediately, babies started dying. Before June 2015, the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital had about 2 or 3 baby deaths per year. That is normal for a unit of its size. Babies die in neonatal care. It is a sad reality. But those deaths are usually expected. Doctors see them coming. They prepare the families, they call the priests. But what happened in the summer of 2015 was not normal. On June the 8th, 2015, a baby boy known in court as Baby A died. He was a twin born 6 weeks early, but doing well. He was breathing on his own, being fed his mother's milk. Then Lucy Letby came on duty as his nurse. Within 19 minutes, the baby collapsed. His skin turned a strange color, pink patches over blue, and despite everything the doctors tried, Baby A was dead before 9 o'clock that night. The very next day, Baby A's twin sister, Baby B, also collapsed. It happened just after the parents were convinced to leave her bedside and go get some rest. She stopped breathing. She turned the same strange color her brother had, but this time The doctors got there in time and the baby B survived. 2 weeks later, baby C died. Then baby D died. 3 dead babies in 2 weeks in a unit that normally lost 2 or 3 in a whole year. Dr. Stephen Breary, the head of the neonatal unit, called a meeting. He asked the unit manager, Arian Powell, and the hospital's nursing director, Alison Kelly, to look at what was going on. They did a quick staffing check and they found something. One nurse had been on duty every single time, Lucy Letby. Breary later said he remembered thinking, "Oh no, it can't be Lucy. Not nice Lucy." Nobody suspected murder, not yet. But the seed of worry had been planted. The death kept coming. In August 2015, baby E, another twin, died after losing a huge amount of blood. His mother had walked into the room and found her son in distress with blood around his mouth. Lucy Letby just stood there. She said the blood came from a feeding tube. Baby's mother had no idea what she had walked into. The prosecution claimed the mother had walked in on Letby in the middle of an attack. Baby E's twin brother, baby F, was also harmed, according to the charges. His blood sugar dropped to dangerous levels because, prosecutors said, someone had given him insulin he did not need. In September, baby G was left severely brain damaged after being overfed through a tube. She survived, but she would need care for the rest of her life. By October 2015, Dr. Breary had counted 5 dead babies in just a few months. He brought his concern to the nursing director and the hospital's medical director, Dr. Jan Harvey. He told them that Lucy Letby was the common factor. He was told in his own words, "It's unlikely. We'll see." In February 2016, another consultant, Dr. Ravi Jayaram, had an experience that would haunt him forever. He walked into the unit one night and found Lucy Letby standing by an incubator. The baby inside, known later as baby K, appeared to have stopped breathing. The oxygen levels were dropping. The alarms should have been going off. But Letby was just standing there, not moving, not calling for help. Dr. Jayaram noticed the breathing tube had come out. He called for help and the baby survived. But from that night on, he was convinced something was very, very wrong. Now, here is where the story takes a turn that makes a lot of people very angry. Dr. Breary and Dr. Jayaram kept pushing. They wrote emails, they asked for meetings, they begged senior management to take action, to call the police, to get Lucy Letby off the ward. But the executive at the top of the hospital did not listen. Not for months. Not for over a year. Instead of investigating Letby, the hospital investigating the doctors who were raising the alarm. The CEO, Tony Chambers, and the medical director, Jan Harvey, told the consultants that there was no evidence, that the reviews had not found a case, that Letby should be allowed to come back to work. They demanded that the doctors write letters of apology to Letby for the things they had said about her. They warned the doctors there would be consequences if they refused to cooperate, including the possibility of being reported to the General Medical Council. Dr. Jayaram was ordered to attend a mediation meeting with Letby, the woman he believed was killing babies, and sit across her while she asked, "Will you work with me when I come back?" Letby herself filed a formal complaint against the hospital for removing her from duties. The hospital found in her favor. CEO Tony Chambers personally apologized to Letby and her parents. Meanwhile, 2 more babies died. In June 2016, 2 triplet boys, baby O and baby P, died on back-to-back days under Letby care. Another baby, baby Q, collapsed 3 days in a row. Only after this last death, in late June 2016, was Lucy Letby finally taken off the ward. She was moved to a desk job in the Risk and Patient Safety Office, a job that gave her access to the very files being used to investigate her. And the police? They were not called until April 2017, almost 2 years after the first baby died. When Dr. Jairam and Dr. Breary finally sat down with the detectives and explained what had been happening, the police understood the problem within 10 minutes. Dr. Jairam later said, "I could have punched the air." Dr. Breary told the guardians that if the hospital had acted when he first asked, 2 of the triplets could be going to school now who aren't. To understand what was happening at the Countess of Chester, you also need to understand what was happening across England at that time. In 2015, the National Health Service was under extreme pressure. Years of budget cuts and staff shortages had left hospitals across the country struggling. The infant mortality rate in England and Wales rose that year, a worrying trend linked by some experts to the strain on the system. The Countess of Chester was no different. A government inspection in early 2016 found problems with staffing and skill levels on the neonatal unit. There were not enough nurses, not enough specialist doctors, and not enough beds. The hospital was treating babies who were sicker than it was set up to handle because bigger hospitals nearby were full. Plumbing problems meant that sewage sometimes backed up into the sinks on the neonatal unit. Tests later found a dangerous bacteria called Pseudomonas in the unit's water supply, which had caused cases of chest infections in some babies. Some experts later argued that these conditions alone could explain the rise in death. Others said the conditions were bad, but not bad enough to explain what happened. This became one of the central arguments in the debate about Lucy Letby's guilt. The police investigation was called Operation Hummingbird. It was massive. Over 2,000 witnesses, more than 500,000 pages of medical records. Detectives spent years going through nursing schedules, medical charts, text messages, and Facebook records. Reading about the case in the news, a retired doctor named Dewey Evans contacted the National Crime Agency in May 2017 and offered his help. He was a former consultant who had been working as a paid expert witness in court cases for decades. Evans would go on to become the lead medical expert for the prosecution, a role that would later become one of the most debated parts of the whole case. On July 3, 2018, police officers arrived at Lucy Letby's home in Chester. Her parents were there. Police body cameras captured the moment. Her mother, Susan, can be heard crying out, begging the officers. Lucy hugged her cat goodbye and told her parents, "You know I didn't do it." Her mother wailed, "I know you didn't. We know that." At her house, police found something that would make headlines around the world. They found 257 confidential handover sheets from the neonatal unit. 21 of those sheets related to the babies she was later accused of harming, and on scraps of paper and post-it notes written in Lucy's own hand were the words, "I am evil. I did this. I killed them on purpose because I am not good enough to care for them." But the same notes also contained lines like, "I haven't done anything wrong. Slander. Discrimination. Why is this happening to me?" The prosecution later called these notes a confession. The defense said they were written on the advice of a therapist who had told Letby to put her feelings on paper during a very difficult time. A professor of criminology named David Wilson told the Guardian that such notes are meaningless and that many people will say things when they are under stress that seem to imply one thing but mean nothing at all. Letby was released on bail. She was arrested again in 2019 and then a third time in November 2020 when she was finally charged with 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder. The trial began at Manchester Crown Court in early October 2022. It would last nearly 10 months, one of the longest criminal trials in British history. The prosecution was led by Nick Johnson. The defense was led by Ben Myers. Lucy Letby sat in the dock and pleaded not guilty to every charge. The prosecution's case was built on several things. First, there was the pattern. Letby was on duty every single time a suspicious event happened. The jury was shown a chart with the names of all the nurses, and only Letby's column was fully marked for every death and collapse. Second, there were medical opinions. Dr. Dewey Evans told the jury that the babies had been killed in different ways. Some by air injected into their veins, some by air pushed into their stomachs through feeding tubes, some by insulin poisoning, one by physical force that damaged her liver. Another key expert, Professor Peter Hindmarsh, a specialist in hormones in children, told the jury he believed 2 babies had been deliberately poisoned with insulin. He said the blood test results strongly suggested that someone had put insulin into the baby's feeding bags. His testimony was described as the smoking gun of the case. Third, there were the notes. The post-it notes with the words, "I am evil, I did this." The prosecution called them a confession. Fourth, there was Letby's behavior. She had searched for the families of dead babies on Facebook, sometimes on the anniversaries of their deaths. She had sent sympathy cards to some families. She had texted colleagues after death, offering to take extra shifts in intensive care. And fifth, there was the fact that nobody ever saw Letby hurt a baby. There was no video, there was no forensic evidence in the traditional sense, no fingerprints on a weapon, no DNA at a crime scene. No one caught her in the act. The defense argued that the babies were not murdered at all. They said the death could be explained by poor care, understaffing, and the fact that the hospital was treating babies who were too sick for a unit of its size. They said the chart was misleading because it did not include incidents that happened when Letby was not on duty. They said the notes were not a confession but the words of a woman in crisis. Letby herself took the stand. She told the jury she had never harmed any baby. She said she collected paper. She said she searched Facebook because she was curious. She said she was a good nurse. The defense did not call any expert medical witnesses of his own. This decision was later widely discussed. Some legal experts believe the defense chose not to put one expert up against the prosecution's 6, thinking it might look worse for Letby. Others believe it was a serious mistake. The jury did not believe Letby. On August 18, 2023, Lucy Letby was found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 others. She was acquitted on 2 counts and the jury could not agree on 6 more. The judge gave her the harshest punishment available in British law, a whole life order on each count, a total of 14 whole life orders. She would never be released. In 2024, a separate jury convicted her of one more attempted murder from the charges the first jury could not agree on. That brought her to a total to 15 whole life orders, all running at the same time. Her mother's reaction in the courtroom was captured by journalists, and Susan Letby cried out, "This can't be right," and broke down. One thing that made this case so unusual was the complete lack of a clear reason. No motive was ever proved in court. The judge said the reasons for Letby's actions would never be known. The prosecution offered some ideas: boredom, a desire for attention, playing God, but none of this were proved beyond doubt. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Soham Das, who has worked with killers in high-security hospitals, said Letby did not fit any known profile. There were no publicly known signs of mental illness or previous violence in her background. He said this was exceptionally rare and unlike anything he had seen in his career. Some experts compared her to Beverly Allitt, a British nurse known as the Angel of Death, who murdered 4 babies and attacked 9 others at a hospital in Lincolnshire in 1991. Allitt used similar methods, injecting air and insulin. The retired detective who caught Allitt said Letby was a copycat murderer, and that it's almost like she read the Allitt book. But there is no confirmed evidence Letby was ever inspired by Allitt. A professor of criminology named David Wilson suggested Letby may have been driven by a hero complex, wanting to be seen as the nurse who tried hardest to save the sickest babies. Others suggested a form of factition disorder, where a person in a position of care deliberately harms someone in order to be part of the drama that follows. But Dr. Das said he did not think Letby fits that pattern either, because she did not appear to be seeking attention for herself. One line from the notes found in her home may offer a clue. Among the scattered words, she wrote about an overwhelming fear that she would never have children or marry, and would never know what it's like to have a family. Some have suggested she may have felt jealousy toward the families she cared for, but this is only a guess. The truth, if there is one, may never be known. For many people, the story ended there. Lucy Letby was a monster, and she was behind bars forever. But for others, the questions were just beginning. In May 2024, the New Yorker magazine published a 13,000-word investigation by Rachel Aviv. It looked at the evidence and raised serious questions about whether the trial had been fair. The article was so sensitive that it was blocked online in the UK because Letby still faced a retrial. British readers shared PDF copies in secret. Aviv pointed to the hospital staffing problems, the sewage backing up into sinks, the lack of specialist doctors, and the wider pressures on the NHS at the time. Then came the statisticians. Several leading figures, including a former president of the Royal Statistical Society, raised serious concerns about the shift chart shown to the jury. They said it only showed incidents where Letby was present and did not include at least 6 deaths and collapses that happened when she was not on duty. One professor said the statistical errors were similar to those in the Sally Clark case, but worse. Sally Clark was a mother wrongly convicted of killing her 2 sons based on bad statistics. She was later cleared. The Royal Statistical Society itself published a report about the dangers of using statistics in medical criminal cases and drew attention to the case of Lucia de Berg, a Dutch nurse convicted in 2003 of murdering patients based on almost identical reasoning. She was always on duty when patients died. De Berg spent 6 years in prison before she was completely cleared in 2010. The deaths were all natural. And then came the most dramatic moment yet. In February 2025, an international panel of 14 medical experts, led by Dr. Shu Lee, the Canadian doctor whose own research paper had been used by the prosecution to prove air embolism, held a press conference in London. Their conclusion was dramatic. They said they had reviewed every case, and in every case they found that the death or injury could be explained by natural causes or by poor medical care. They found no evidence of deliberate harm. We did not find any murders, Dr. Lee said. He said his original research had been misunderstood by the prosecution's expert. The skin discoloration on the babies was not a sign of air injected into their blood. It was a sign of low oxygen, something that can happen for many reasons in sick newborns. Dr. Lee also said the standard of care at the Countess of Chester was so poor that in his home country of Canada, the unit would have been shut down. These findings remain strongly contested. The prosecution's expert, Dr. Evans, calls them deeply flawed. The Court of Appeal had already upheld the convictions in 2 separate rulings. No court has overturned them based on this new evidence. The panel's conclusions are part of the defense submission to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, but they have not been tested in a courtroom. The families of the victims, through their lawyers, described the growing doubt as profoundly damaging and said they have no doubt about Letby's guilt. What do you think? At the center of much of the debate is Dr. Dewey Evans, the prosecution's main expert witness star. Evans is a retired doctor who had not practiced clinical medicine since 2009. He was not a specialist in neonatal care. He ran a business providing paid expert testimony in court cases. Evans was not brought in by the police. He saw news reports about the investigation and emailed the National Crime Agency in May 2017 offering to help. During the trial, Letby defense team tried to get his testimony thrown out. They pointed to a previous case in which a senior judge, Lord Justice Jackson, had called one of Evans' reports worthless and said he makes no effort to provide a balanced opinion. In an unusual step, Jackson sent a letter to the trial judge in the Letby case with his previous judgment attached, signaling concerns about Evans as a witness. The trial judge allowed Evans to testify anyway. The Court of Appeal later reviewed this decision and found no reason to exclude his evidence. Evans himself once said publicly that he had lost only one court case in 35 years. Experts in forensic science said that kind of attitude was the opposite of what an impartial witness should have. But in March 2026, an even bigger problem came to light. The Guardian reported that Professor Peter Hindmarsh, the prosecution's expert on insulin poisoning, had been under investigation by the General Medical Council on the very day he first took the stand, on November the 25th, 2022. The GMC had opened a probe into his fitness to practice based on concerns raised by Great Ormond Street Hospital and University College London hospitals. The concerns include claims that he had harmed patients. A medical tribunal placed restrictions on his clinical work, saying he may pose a real risk to the public and that the concerns may have the potential to impact on his ability to act as an expert witness. But the jury was never told any of this. The Crown Prosecution Service told the defense it would oppose any attempt to inform the jury about the investigation. Hindmarsh gave evidence again 3 months later, in February 2023, while still under investigation. He later removed himself from the GMC register in late 2024, a process called voluntary erasure, which ended the investigation before it reached any conclusion. There was never any formal finding against him. His testimony had been central to two of the prosecution's strongest cases, the alleged insulin poisoning of baby F and baby L. Those were among only 3 charges where the jury reached an unanimous guilty verdict. Letby's legal team has said it will submit this information to the Criminal Cases Review Commission as new evidence. In Parliament, in January 2025, MP David Davis laid out case after case where the prosecution's medical claims appear to be contradicted by the hospital's own records. In one case, BBC, Davis said Letby was not even at the hospital when the key evidence was recorded. Davis called the conviction a clear miscarriage of justice by a judicial system that could not manage difficult statistical and medical scientific evidence. What do you think about it? While the debate about Letby's guilt raged on, the question of what went wrong at the hospital led to its own investigation. In October 2023, the British government set up the Thirlwall Inquiry, led by Lady Justice Thirlwall. His job was not to look at whether Letby was guilty, that was taken as a fact based on the convictions, but to look at how she was able to do what she did for so long. The inquiry heard from 133 witnesses over 59 days between September 2024 and January 2025. Closing submissions took place in March 2025. The evidence was damning for the hospital's leadership. Doctors had raised the alarm again and again, and they had been shut down. Management had prioritized reputation over patient safety. Deaths were not reported properly. The systems that should have caught the problem had failed at every level. In March 2025, lawyers for the former hospital executives asked for the inquiry to be paused, arguing that new medical evidence created a real possibility that Letby's convictions could be overturned. Lady Justice Thirlwall refused. In July 2025, 3 former senior leaders at the hospital were arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. They have been identified in press reports as the former CEO Tony Chambers, the former medical director Jan Harvey, and the former director of nursing Alison Kelly. All 3 were released on bail. The investigation continues. The Thirlwall Inquiry's final report had been delayed several times. Originally expected in late 2025, it was pushed to early 2026. As of March 2026, it is now expected after Easter. Lady Justice Thirlwall has said the drafting is very well advanced. Well, as of mid-March 2026, right now, the situation is that Lucy Letby is 36 years old. She is serving her sentence in a high-security women's prison. Reports have placed her at both Low Newton in Durham and Brownsfield in Surrey at different points since her conviction. According to press reports, she has taken a job as a librarian in her unit and has been described as a model prisoner. Since the Netflix documentary came out, reports say officers have been checking on her every hour, concerns she might try to harm herself. Her parents, John and Susan, continue to support her. According to press reports, they are now running a small radiator business together in Hereford, trying to rebuild some kind of normal life. Her legal team, led by barrister Mark MacDonald, has submitted 31 expert reports from 26 specialists to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. The Commission confirmed on February the 13, 2026, that a review of her convictions is underway, but noted that material has been arriving throughout the past year. The review could take a long time. The Commission must decide whether there is a real possibility that a conviction would not be upheld, a high legal bar. In January 2026, the Crown Prosecution Service confirmed that Letby will not face any new charges. Police had submitted evidence for 11 further charges, 2 of murder and 9 of attempted murder, relating to 9 babies at both the Countess of Chester Hospital and Liverpool Women's Hospital. Prosecutors said the evidence did not meet the legal standard. Cheshire Police publicly disagreed with this decision and said it was not the outcome they had anticipated. In February 2026, coroners formally opened inquest into the deaths of 5 babies Letby was convicted of murdering, including baby A and baby D. The hearings were adjourned and are expected to resume later in the year. This inquest cannot overturn convictions, but will formally record how each baby died. Also in February 2026, Netflix released a documentary called The Investigation of Lucy Letby. It included police body camera footage of her arrest, clips from her police interviews, and testimony from investigators and from mother of one of the victims. The documentary also gave significant time to Dr. Shuley and barrister Mark MacDonald, who argue that Letby is innocent. Letby's parents have called the documentary an invasion of their privacy. They said watching it would likely kill us. And in March 2026, The Guardian revealed the information about Professor Hindmarsh's investigation, a development that has added new fuel to the debate and which Letby's lawyers say they will use in their application to the Commission. This case is not just about one nurse and one hospital. It is about the kind of questions that keep people up at night. How do you prove a crime when nobody saw it happen? When there is no weapon, no fingerprints, no DNA? When the only evidence is statistics and the opinions of medical experts who disagree with each other? How do you protect babies in a system that is understaffed, underfunded, and afraid of bad publicity? And how do you tell the difference between a killer hiding in a plain sight and an innocent woman who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? There are people who are absolutely certain that Lucy Letby murdered those babies. They point to the notes, they point to the Facebook searches, they point to the pattern. They point to 2 juries who heard all the evidence and found her guilty. They point to the Court of Appeal, which reviewed the case twice and upheld the convictions both times. And there are people who are equally certain that she did not. They point to the lack of forensic evidence, they point to the concerns about the statistics, they point to the expert panel that found no murders. They point to the questions about the prosecution's expert witnesses. They point to the hospital that was falling apart. Both sides care deeply about the truth. Both sides care about the families. And both sides are watching the Criminal Cases Review Commission waiting to see what happens next. Whatever the outcome, the babies at the center of this story will never come back. Their families will carry this weight forever. And the questions raised by this case about justice, about evidence, about how we decide who is guilty and who is not, those questions will be with us for a very long time. If Lucy Letby is guilty, she is one of the worst killers in British history. If she is innocent, this is one of the worst miscarriages of justice this country has ever seen. Either way, the system failed. Babies died. And the truth, whatever it is, still has not fully come to light. This is the case of Lucy Letby, and it is far from over. A heavy story, and I would really love to hear your thoughts on it. Leave a comment below and let's talk about it. If you found this video meaningful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe there down to help the channel grow. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and for listening to these stories. Take care of yourself, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.